So we've had plenty of conversations at length on this channel about Nintendo and their sporadic update schedule for Nintendo Switch Online, and there are periods of time where it seems like they've forgotten that they have a paid subscription service that needs new games, and then there are other periods of times like we are in right now where it is just truly one update after the other, and it's actually hard to keep up with. Now, some of these are all related to the same franchise, and it seems like they're taking this drip feed approach to these Donkey Kong Land games, which we now have all three of playable on the service just weeks apart from each other's releases, but that could spell good things for the continued Donkey Kong update roadmap, because maybe, just maybe, we can get some of the missing N64 entries within the franchise, such as Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing, and I do want to have that conversation while also booting up Donkey Kong Land 3, that was the most recent title added, but we even have an additional update besides all of these other ones we've been seeing for Donkey Kong Land, and the expansion pack tier getting the set of new Sega Genesis games, the 3 new Sega Genesis games just about a week ago. And you think back to October and we saw like 3 separate rounds of expansion pack upgrades. And so besides all of that, Nintendo also made this following announcement that a Puzzle Classic returns. Tetris for NES comes to Nintendo Switch Online on December 12th. So a absolute timeless classic that many fans wondered why it hasn't been in the service this whole time will finally be added on December 12th. And then we also most recently had the addition of Donkey Kong Land 3, where you can see join Dixie Kong and Kiddy Kong on an adventure to try to find the lost world. Donkey Kong Land 3 is now available to play for Nintendo Switch Online members on Game Boy. And we actually do have to talk about the version of this game that we got as opposed to Japan, which does have a far superior version in the visual department because it was actually made for the Game Boy Color, and that's what they got, as opposed to the US and Europe just getting the Game Boy edition instead. So kind of getting the short end of the stick on that, but I will tell you that this update frequency is absolutely fantastic to see, and let's hope it somewhat continues from here, as we now know that this service will be rolling forward to the next generation consoles. So we'll dive into more detail on all of that stuff. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And with that, we'll hop right over to some Donkey Kong Land 3 gameplay. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in the video that we kind of got the subpar version of Donkey Kong Land 3, which was disappointing to see because Japan did get a Game Boy Color version of the game, which just has a nicer color palette overall. Interestingly enough, though, funny, after I mentioned that, filming the intro on my homepage was a recommended video from Game Explain, and it didn't ever occur to me that you could download a Japanese version of the Nintendo Switch Online app if you have a Japan eShop account, which I do, and then turn around and actually play it with your main profile. So we're gonna check out the color version. You are welcome to do this as well. I will have their video linked in the description down below, but for, you know, Donkey Kong games specifically, because I am a huge fan of them, I do like to have the more enhanced color version. That color palette really looks very different, very much more enjoyable to me to see everything in color as opposed to not. Just even, you know, briefly playing through some of Donkey Kong Land 1, it was you know, very obvious right away that I would much prefer color to just the you know, the Game Boy Color scheme. So you can do that yourself. It's pretty easy. You know, just kind of give you like a quick summary. Somebody in the comments section in that video said that you could do it without creating a whole eShop account or like a Nintendo account, and doing it that way, that you could actually do it just by changing the region settings if you would like to on your console. So maybe that's the easier way. The way that I have it done is I have a separate profile that I did sign up for and made the region Japan. And you know, little pro tip, if there's ever a game you absolutely need to play early for any reason, which the only reason I sometimes do this is for the sake of videos, but you can buy them, buy Nintendo published games about maybe 12 to 14 hours earlier than they come out in other regions of the world, because you know, Japan's technically ahead of us in terms of their clock and calendar. Now the downgrade will be for this is that we actually cannot see, you know, the text is not translated or anything like that in this app. So obviously, you know, any of the Japanese edition games, just like we've had Nintendo actually port over plenty of Japan only games that never got their text translated. They still don't translate it whenever they add it into the service. It's just kind of like you're playing one of those, but you might have an occasional hang up when you're trying to, you know, save or talk to an NPC or getting any of those kind of details. But for a game like Donkey Kong with its gameplay, overall, I don't think that it's too depressing to be able to read text at all times. And, you know, obviously, even with the Game Boy color scheme, it's still very much a Game Boy game. Sprites are very large on screen. It's kind of, you don't get the kind of, you know, same kind of view distance as you would on like an SNES. But nonetheless, these are all their own Donkey Kong experiences, and as somebody who's just been a lifelong fan of Donkey Kong Country, I couldn't be more happy to see all three of these games make it into the service. And I will tell you this as well. Obviously, you know, many people know, I don't think I said it in the intro, but it is Donkey Kong Country's 30th anniversary, if you can believe that, as that actually game came out November of 1994. So we are in 2024. So 30 years for Donkey Kong is now come and gone, or Donkey Kong Country rather, just Country specifically. And it does seem like Nintendo is not necessarily saying like happy 30th anniversary Donkey Kong Country fans, here's all these Donkey Kong Land games, but that's effectively what they're doing without saying it. And the question then becomes, does it stop here or not? Because obviously some fan favorites such as Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing are still sorely missing from the N64 games lineup. And I will point out, I believe it was last year in December, we actually saw multiple N64 games get updated because, you know, it's that holiday season. I feel like Nintendo gets a little bit of that, you know, Christmas giving spirit, if you will, and try to make it like a promotion type of month where we're going to give you more than what you normally get. And there's the slightest possibility, in my opinion, that we continue to kind of get weekly NSO updates for just a little bit. And if that is to be the case, might Donkey Kong 64 and or Diddy Kong Racing make it over in the next batch of updates? I certainly hope so. I think like those are two of like the sorest missing games from the library of games at this point, just because we have so many other playable N64 games. I think you could make a strong case that you know, Smash 64 is the next one too that should be added. I mean, that just as much as Donkey Kong 64, I think that one needs to be added. So outside of, you know, maybe a handful of N64 games really sorely missing, I do think for the most part, if we could expect any kind of update schedule even close to what we've been getting these last few months for NSO going forward, it would just be that much more exciting of a service for me. And really, you know, funnily enough, I've actually become quite a bit more pumped about the service, even just like, you know, making these few different videos here recently, due to the fact that Furukawa and we didn't really do too well with that, but just due to the fact that Furukawa came out and totally confirmed, outlined, like no questions asked, and Nintendo Switch Online is rolling forward to the next generation Nintendo hardware. And if you really think about how exciting that is, we are not hitting the reset button on any of our games library, whether it come to actual just Nintendo Switch games, because like think about that too, like the collection of Switch games out there that many of us all own as lifelong Nintendo fans, or even if you just got into gaming on Nintendo consoles on the Switch, like so many great games exist on this platform. All of those roll forward, and you're telling me that the subscription service that Nintendo has really built out, I know not everybody's a fan of subscription services, but just the sheer amount of games that have been you know, launched onto the NSO you know, collection of consoles is really impressive. We messed up with this. Should have killed that other one. Funnily enough, on the Pro controller, these buttons are absolutely reversed on the Game Boy from what I like to play. Like I want to be holding the run button the entire time, and it's the opposite of how it would be on a SNES controller. So got to adjust to that a little bit. But yeah, you know, you just stop and think about where our kind of update roadmap goes from here. And the logical progression with knowing the NSO rolls forward to the next gen hardware. Why do I keep going into that barrel? We need to, no point in redoing this over and over again. You know, we will now be at a point where consoles are next in the conversation. Consoles like GameCube, consoles like the DS and the Wii potentially, you know, all of that being at some point, I believe, will be added to the service. And then, you know, you think about the rotating lineup of updates that we might still see from there, just like the NES getting an update with Tetris. Like, yeah, it should have been in there a long time ago, no doubt, but nonetheless, like NES is still getting solid updates besides you know, these new console editions like Game Boy Advance, N64 and Sega Genesis and all of this. So, you know, Nintendo definitely went a super long time without updating Genesis, which was kind of a problem, but they threw in Vector Man in the last update, and that just put put the service right over the top for me, because I really wanted to see that game included. Hopefully we get Vector Man 2 in the future. I think the fact that we got one does signify good things for the rest of that franchise coming over, which I guess they only made 2 games in total. But anyway, all of that to say, NSO is clearly, I feel like it's normally pretty easy to find some valid complaints online about it. And, you could say that, yeah, Nintendo should still let us buy these games as one-offs if you don't want to be subscribed to that service the entire time. But nonetheless, I think that right now it's pretty easy to come to a conclusion that the service is a good value for what you're spending, what you're getting, at least lately. So here's hoping it stays that way. Here's hoping Nintendo kind of does more Donkey Kong updates as time goes on. And we have, some more of the throwback Donkey Kong Country era goodness to play. Really want to play through Donkey Kong 64 again, so I'm hopeful that's next up. Not to mention Diddy Kong Racing. I mean, literally, that's still a mode that I would hope that the next Mario Kart, they do some kind of story-themed adventure racer like Diddy Kong Racing was, because you just never really saw hardly anything like it since that game came out. And I know there's like some comparisons that people will make that I've seen when we've discussed that game before, but for me, anything I've played, nothing has had that kind of an entertaining vehicle kart racer style game and an adventure story with boss battles and everything to boot. Really like just a fun time in that particular game. So let me know in the comments down below how you're feeling about all of these sporadic NSO updates, and kind of all being multiple updates per week here lately that we've had to talk about, or every other, it seems like every week to every week and a half, we're talking about a new round of updates. Is that something you think we'll see continue through the rest of December? Do you think we've already kind of gotten through everything that we're going to see Nintendo add in a batch all at once like that right now? And let me know, what do you want to see most from the future of the service? Do you think that things like GameCube and Wii and DS games are potentially in the conversation as soon as the next generation console hardware launch, or do you think stuff like that will be quite a bit further off? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.